Information gathering. Objective: to study and gather information about the target, which may include any of the following: an individual, an organization, web, system, or network. This is done via direct intrusion or indirect abstraction of information. Outcome: on completion of this chapter, one would have a complete blueprint of the security status irrespective of the target being any of the following: system, web, or network. Having got an idea about hacking and cracking, let's get into the process of launching an attack. Uh-oh, but whom are you going to attack? The first and foremost task here is to fix the target, which may be an individual or an organization. So, let's fix a target, say Mr. XXX and XYZ & Co. Now, let's attack. Launching an attack now leads to gathering information about the target. What is information gathering? Information gathering is the preparatory phase for an attack that involves a collection of information to reveal holes in a system. This process is also called reconnaissance, which is the term the military uses when it has to gather information in order to study the enemy. Reconnaissance can be done in two ways: passive or active. Passive reconnaissance is the method of gathering information without directly intruding on the target, that is, by probing the web. Active reconnaissance involves direct intrusion on the target to collect information. Now that the target is fixed, let's probe the target for information. But what is happening? The target is able to track the attacker. What happened when the probe was initiated? Whenever a request is sent to a server, say for example, whatismyip.com, it captures the actual IP of the sender. What can be done to avoid from being traced? Masking identity. In order to hide the actual IP, a person can send the request via another machine, making it act as a proxy server in order to mask the identity. Routing the traffic from the attacker's system to the proxy involves tunneling. Tunneling is the creation of a private channel between two nodes via the public network, that is the internet, where the channel can be secured using protocols such as SSH, HTTP, L2TP, etc. Masking identity is done when carrying out either active or passive reconnaissance. For carrying out passive reconnaissance, the following methods can be followed: SSH tunneling, HTTP tunneling, or Tor. For carrying out active reconnaissance, which involves anonymous application usage against the target, the following methods can be used: proxy chains or proxy trojans. VPN or virtual private network can be used for masking identity while carrying out both active and passive reconnaissance. SSH tunneling. What is SSH? Secure Shell is a protocol that runs on port 22 to ensure secure data communication between two systems. This secure data communication is achieved by establishing an encrypted channel called an SSH tunnel. The process of creating the channel is known as SSH tunneling. Let's see how an attacker makes use of SSH tunneling to mask his identity. Consider this. An attacker is trying to access a server called whatismyip from his browser. When a request is initiated from the browser, the traffic is directed to port 80 and uses the gateway IP of the system or the network to reach the destination server, whatismyip. When the whatismyip server receives the request, it enumerates the source IP as the attacker's IP. In order to route the browser's traffic via a remote server using SSH tunneling, the attacker creates an account on a remote server which renders shell services. Once an account is created, then with two simple steps, an SSH tunnel can be established between the attacker's browser and the remote server by configuring the browser and a shell client application, for example, PuTTY. Step 1. Rerouting browser traffic. The normal browser traffic routed via the gateway should be rerouted via a proxy server. This can be done by configuring the browser by choosing the option Use Proxy Server for your LAN to use SOCKS proxy. The LAN is then configured to use loopback IP 127.0.0.1 via port 8080, an alternative port for port 80 as a source port. Step 2. Bridging client and server. Creating a bridge between the client's port as the source port and the remote server port as the destination port can be done using an SSH client application, such as PuTTY. The configuration of PuTTY is done by entering the settings pertaining to the remote server that requires the name of the remote server, for example shell.cjb.net, the port on the remote server to which the traffic has to be forwarded, that is 22, the connection type pertaining to the port, that is SSH, and the name for these configurations, for example test. Settings pertaining to the client requires the source port, which is configured as 8080 in the browser, and the type of connection is set to dynamic, which tunnels all traffic to remote destinations via this port. Having set the source and destination, the remote server account can be accessed via PuTTY by providing the correct login credentials. Upon successful login, an SSH tunnel will be established between the attacker's browser and the remote server. When the attacker initiates a request to whatismyip server, the traffic gets routed to the loopback address on port 8080, which is now connected with port 22 on the remote server. When the whatismyip server receives the request, it enumerates the source IP as the proxy's IP instead of the attacker's IP. This is how an attacker masks his identity using SSH tunneling. Individual profiling. Our target may be an individual or an organization, which paves the way to collecting their respective profiles. Fixing an individual as the target, the thrust falls immediately in framing the target's social profile, where the vital thing is to find how people call the individual, which may be his or her pet name or nickname. Next comes finding the way to contact the individual, which is primarily via the email ID. Look at social networking sites and communities such as Facebook, Twitter, Google Groups, MySpace, About.me, Netlog, Badoo, Orkut, Meetup, High5, and Tagged. These reveal the name, email ID, and also the likes and interests of an individual. Not many are aware of the information that they post on their Facebook wall. Looks of the target individual can be extracted, and by tracking the status messages of the individual, which includes the physical location of the places they loiter, a physical attack on the target individual can be launched. Google Groups provide a shared user interface that allows threaded conversations among like-minded people. Meetup differs from other social networking sites in a way that facilitates offline group meetings, which provide a way to interact with people unified with common interests. People search websites to help in locating the physical address of the target individual. Such sites include 411.com, Anywho, Yellow Pages, peoplefinders.com, personlookup.com.au, PeakU, PeopleSmart, People, Zabba Search, and 192.com. 192.com reveals the physical location of the individual along with the phone number of people residing in the UK, whereas Zabba Search is yet another website that allows a person to acquire the location of an individual in the US. Believing that the target individual is the only source to gather information is not a good idea. Finding the house inmates or the target's close associates, that is, relatives, make the job easier. Family-tree.co.uk is a website that allows tracking information about the people in the UK, and the website search.ancestry.com allows tracking the very same information for people in and around European countries. There are times when you might have arrived at a phone number but not the name of the target, or vice versa. In this case, Truecaller, a telephone lookup and reverse lookup directory, can lend a helping hand. Retro-sleuth.com is yet another website offering the same service. Every individual does something to earn their living. They often appear differently in this career world than they do in their social world. This leads to framing one's career profile. People are often called by their nicknames in the social networking world, but they may not be known with the same name when it comes to their work arena. And this information needs to be gathered. LinkedIn plays a vital role in managing one's professional identity. When surfing for a profile in LinkedIn, it may reveal the official email ID for contacting the individual and professional details such as skill sets, recently acquired skills, organization associations, domain names, experience, professional network connections. Other business networking sites also aim to provide the same service, such as TalkBizNow, Viadeo, BranchOut, and Zing. BranchOut is a Facebook application that spits out both social and professional information, which includes work history and corporate relationships of the target on a dashboard. Consolidating the information gathered, the individual profile of the target is done. Email address harvesting. What is email address harvesting? Obtaining lists of email addresses using various methods is called email address harvesting. Why do we do email address harvesting? Email harvesting allows the ability to track down other email addresses associated with the target and their network of connections. For harvesting the email IDs associated with the target, use search_email_collector, which is a module in the Metasploit console. Once the domain is set and the exploit is triggered, it searches for the email IDs associated with this domain in universal search engines such as Google, Yahoo, and Bing. It also looks for the email addresses on the domain's official site, social networking sites, forums, blogs, and guestbook. Once an email ID associated with the domain is found, it is extracted to be displayed. Harvesting of email IDs associated within an organization paves the way for launching the next attack.